Welcome to the Deep Dive. Now, if you're with us today, you've probably spent a good amount of time on 20th century history. So you already have a really solid foundation in one of the most famous or maybe infamous documents ever, the Treaty of Versailles.
That's right. The big stuff, the crazy reparations figures, the military getting slashed, losing all that land.
And, of course, the War Guilt Clause.
Exactly. That sting of being blamed for everything. Those are the terms that, really defined the aftermath.
But our mission today is to go a bit deeper than that. We want to go backstage, really.
Yeah.
To step into Germany in those chaotic months, between the fighting stopping in November 1918 and the treaty actually being signed in June 1919.
It's all about context.
Right. We want to understand the sheer internal collapse, the politics, the economy, the society, that whole mess that the new Weimar Republic was born into.
Under conditions that, well, you could say almost guaranteed it was going to struggle.
It's a huge shift in perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the men who signed that treaty, they weren't the powerful German empire that started the war.
Not at all. They were the desperate leaders of a state that had already basically imploded from the inside.
So we're tracking that explosive shift from a stable, rich empire to this fragile, debt-ridden, and frankly hated republic.
From day one.
So this whole story, it doesn't really start at a peace conference. It starts with just total disobedience.
Complete breakdown.
We talk about the armistice, but the real story is this shattering of authority that kicks off in late October 1918.
Yeah, what's wild is the front lines hadn't totally broken. Germany just sort of fell apart from within. The army, the navy, they were exhausted, starving.
And just done fighting for a cause they knew was lost.
Absolutely.
And it's the military itself that really lands the final blow to the Kaiser's regime. On October 28, 1918, the German Naval Command in Kiel orders the fleet out for one last, basically suicidal attack on the British.
A glory ride.
Right. But the sailors, they just refused.
They said no. And that wasn't just, a military failure. That was a massive political challenge.
It really was.
Yeah.
The sailors had just had enough. And their refusal, the Kiel Mutiny, that was the first domino, wasn't it?
It's the spark. Because as soon as news of that mutiny hits the cities on the mainland, it just fires up the workers who are already starving, furious after 4 years of war.
So they join in.
They join the protests, demanding an end to the war, demanding the Kaiser abdicate.
And here's the part that I think is it's mind-blowing. The Kaiser sends soldiers to crush these protests.
Right, the standard procedure.
But the soldiers, they get there, they see their own countrymen, and they switch sides. They join the protesters.
And that's it. Once the Kaiser lost the army, his rule was over. Finished.
The whole German state just melts away.
Yeah, there's no one left willing to defend the old system. So by November 9th, Kaiser Wilhelm II knows the game is up. He abdicates and basically he flees the country in secret.
And into that power vacuum, that really dangerous sudden vacuum, steps Friedrich Ebert.
The social democrat.
Exactly. The empire's gone, so Ebert declares Germany a democratic republic. And then 2 days later, November 11th, his new unelected government signs the armistice.
And we have to pause there because that one act, that necessary act of ending the war, it instantly creates this political cancer that's going to plague the Weimar Republic for its entire existence.
Because they were the ones who surrendered.
They were the ones stained from day one, like you said.
So beyond the politics, what did Germany even look like on the ground when Ebert took over? I mean, it was a rich, stable country in 1914.
Oh, by 1918, it was an absolute disaster. The sources paint a catastrophic picture of just total financial ruin.
How so?
Well, the war was financed by debt, not by taxes. The government borrowed huge amounts of money from its own people and from other countries like the U.S.
Assuming they'd win and make the losers pay for it all?
Precisely. But they lost. So instead of victory spoils, they inherited just mountains of IOUs.
Wow. They were completely hollowed out. And German industry was only making war stuff. They weren't making cars or cameras or things they could sell abroad to, get money coming in.
So the economy was just
exhausted. And then you have the human cost, the British naval blockade.
Right. That was just devastating.
It was designed to starve the population into giving up. And it worked. Our sources estimate something like 750,000 German civilians died from hunger and disease.
750,000.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to imagine the bitterness that caused across the whole country.
It was a deep, deep wound, and on top of that, you have these huge social divisions growing.
Because some people got rich from the war.
Right. Exactly. Some factory owners made a fortune, but the average workers had their wages capped by the state. So there's this huge resentment building.
And the future costs.
Almost unthinkable. The new government now has to pay pensions for 60,000 war widows. For 2 million children without fathers. I mean, that cost alone would cripple the budget for decades. So let's just sum this up. The foundations are military mutiny, a leader who fled, massive debt, a dead economy, social anger, and a starving population.
It's hard to imagine a weaker starting point for trying to build a new democracy.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. The Constitution they came up with in all this chaos. Because Friedrich Ebert and his allies, they were genuine Democrats, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. They really aimed to create something progressive, something truly representative.
And they did, in many ways. They put in a Bill of Rights, guaranteeing freedom of speech, equality.
And crucially, they gave almost everyone the vote.
Yeah, all men and women over the age of 20, which was, for the time, incredibly advanced.
Way ahead of the curve. Our sources point out that even in Britain at this point, only women over 30 could vote. So on paper, the system was designed to be incredibly fair.
But there's always a but.
There's always a but. And in that beautiful progressive framework, they accidentally embedded 2 constitutional time bombs.
Okay.
Structural problems that basically guaranteed instability.
So what's the first one?
Proportional representation. PR.
Which, again, sounds like the fairest system possible.
It's the definition of fairness in theory. If your party gets 10% of the vote, you get 10% of the seats in the parliament, the Reichstag.
So what was the problem?
The problem is what happens in a country that's as divided and desperate as Germany was. The vote just shatters.
Into dozens of tiny parties.
Dozens of them, from the communists on the far left to, the extreme nationalists on the far right. And the result is that no single party could ever get a majority. Ever.
So no one ever had a clear mandate to govern.
Exactly. Every government had to be a weak, messy coalition of parties that, frankly, hated each other.
That sounds like a recipe for gridlock.
Total gridlock. Weimar had something like 15 different governments in just 14 years. Every time a big crisis hit, the coalition would just fall apart.
No stability, no long-term planning. And for the public, it must have just looked like chaos.
Complete chaos. And then you have the second time bomb, which sounds like something from the old empire, not a new democracy. Article 48.
Article 48, what was that?
Well, you could call it a necessary evil, maybe. It allowed the President Ebert, at first, to pass laws by himself, to issue decrees without Parliament's approval.
Just one person making laws.
But only in an emergency. It was meant to be a kind of safety valve, for dealing with all the riots and coup attempts that were happening.
So it was designed for a crisis, but it became a way to get around a parliament that couldn't agree on anything.
That's the danger right there. It gave huge power to one person. It was a loophole that let the president act like a temporary dictator.
Bypassing the very democracy they were trying to build.
And that provision would be, devastatingly abused later on.
So as this flawed republic is trying to even get started, it's already poisoned by the politics of surrender.
Absolutely.
The new government is tied to ending the war, and that was its original sin.
It was. So many ex-soldiers, and a lot of the middle class too, they truly believed the German army hadn't been beaten on the battlefield.
They believed they'd been cheated.
By traitors at home. So Ebert and his Democratic colleagues, they were immediately branded the November criminals.
Accused of stabbing Germany in the back.
So the government was born not just into debt and chaos, but under this cloud of just pure political hatred.
Okay, so we've got a government that's broke, it's structurally flawed, and it's already seen as a bunch of traitors.
Not a great start.
And then, in the spring of 1919, the Treaty of Versailles lands on their desk. And it feels like a massive confirmation of everything their enemies were saying.
That's exactly how it was seen. The German delegation, they went to Versailles thinking they were going to negotiate a peace.
Based on Wilson's 14 points.
Right. A fair peace. But what they got was a diktat. It was a harsh order, and they had zero power to change it.
So let's just quickly remind ourselves of the sheer weight of what they were forced to take on.
Well, on land, Germany lost a huge 13% of its territory. A lot of that had critical resources, like coal. And they were literally split in two to give Poland access to the sea.
Which was a huge humiliation.
A massive one. Militarily, the army was cut to just 100,000 men, no tanks, no submarines, no air force, and the navy was tiny.
And then the real kicker, the war guilt clause.
The political and financial double whammy, as you say. Blaming Germany for the war gave the Allies the legal right to demand reparations.
And that bill, when it finally came in 1921, was a crushing £6.6 billion.
For a country already bankrupt from borrowing to fight the war, that number was just. It was science fiction. There was no way to pay it.
But beyond the numbers, what was the feeling in Germany? The terms were a real shock to people, weren't they?
A huge shock. The government had been telling people for 4 years that victory was just around the corner.
So they had no idea how bad things really were.
None. So when the terms came out, the sources just described this explosion of anger, humiliation, and this deep, deep insecurity about the future. It was a national trauma.
And the politicians, they knew they couldn't accept it. But they also knew they couldn't refuse it.
That was the impossible position they were in. They hated the terms, but the Allies were clear. Sign it, or we restart the war and invade Germany.
And the weak, bankrupt Weimar Republic had no army to fight back with.
No ability to resist at all. They felt their hands were tied. They had to sign.
And the tragic irony is that by doing what they had to do, they just reinforced that whole narrative of betrayal.
It confirmed it. In the eyes of their opponents, signing the treaty proved they were the November criminals.
It was the perfect proof for the stab-in-the-back myth.
It really was. Every soldier coming home, every mother whose kid was hungry could now point to the treaty and the men who signed it and say, that's why. It's their fault.
And we see that perfectly in the sources, like that famous German magazine cartoon from the time.
Yes, the one with the mother and her hungry child.
She's telling him they have to spend 100 billion marks before they can eat.
And that image just perfectly captures it. It shows how the public immediately connected the treaty's financial punishment directly to their own suffering.
And they blamed the Weimar government for it.
The treaty didn't create the Republic's enemies, but it handed them the perfect weapon, a weapon they would use for the next 14 years.
So if we pull all of this together, the core idea here is that the Weimar Republic wasn't born in victory or hope.
Not at all.
It was born out of a total military collapse, economic ruin, political chaos. And then it was built with these self-defeating flaws in its own constitution.
Proportional representation guaranteeing chaos, and Article 48 basically inviting dictatorship.
And before this new democracy could even find its feet, it was forced to accept this humiliating treaty that instantly branded its leaders as enemies of the German people.
The November criminals. The Republic started with zero trust, a broken economy, and just this deep well of public anger that it could never, ever escape.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources really show that Weimar's problems weren't just the Treaty of Versailles, as bad as that was.
Right. The treaty was a massive problem, but it wasn't the only.
The internal instability, the economic disaster, the complete lack of public support, all of that guaranteed it was going to be a struggle from the very first day.
Absolutely. Weimar spent its whole life fighting wars on two fronts: the internal economic collapse and the external blame for a treaty it had no choice but to sign. It was just a vicious cycle. So as you continue your studies, here's a thought to take away with you. The 1919 Constitution was, on paper, one of the most democratic in the world at the time. And yet it was exactly those hyper-democratic parts like proportional representation that unintentionally created the political chaos and weakness that helped destroy it. So the question for you is, what do you think was the single biggest threat to Weimar's survival? Was it the terms of the treaty imposed from the outside, or was it the fundamental flaws in the structure of its own government?